What is up, everybody? It's Joe from JLW Games coming at you with another cool video. Today, I'm going to show you how to make a pretty awesome coaster like you're seeing right now. This is a B&M invert coaster, and we're going to be using it today. I'm just going to give you general tips, tricks on how to build better coasters, and today we're just going to be focusing on the ride layout and a bit of custom supporting. We're not going to be doing like station buildings or transfer tracks or anything like that, really. We're mainly just going to be focusing on the ride itself, and yeah, so let's get right into it. Alright, you guys all know this. The hardest part to start off a new coaster build, or any park in general, is when you get to your open world and there's nothing in it, and just knowing where to start. Now, I do urge you to try and find some inspiration or motivation before you get started, so figure out kind of like what do you want to model your coaster after, what type of coaster you want to do, like stuff like that. In general. Same with parks as well. Today we're going to be focusing on coasters, but just you need to visualize what you're going to do first. So today we're going to be doing a B&M invert. So maybe I want to model mine or base mine off of a ride like Banshee or from Kings Island or something along those lines. Like, just pick a ride that you want to kind of get close to. Obviously you're going to make it your own, but kind of get that idea. You can even like use its theme as well, like a little bit with your own little twist. So we're going to start with coasters, and we're going to go to a B&M invert. I do urge you to have some mods if you don't already. I do have the smooth mod. It is definitely useful for when you are smoothing out your coasters. You don't have to have it. I'm not saying you have to have any mods, especially if you're on console. You probably don't have them to begin with. So when it comes to this, I always like to choose down here before I place it. Go down here to your station and make sure you do one of the right to left accident entries, whichever one you prefer. So like whatever you want the entry to be on your left or right, just do one of those. I'm going to do left entry and right exit. So, and then just kind of adjust your height to a good height. I like to raise mine a little bit off the ground for our station, and just like that. So you can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rows of here, but most B&M inverts have 8. So we are going to change the number of cars to 8, and to do that you can go into this, but it looks like we're gonna have to shorten up our station by 1, and then go, actually it won't let us, hold on. 7, 8, there we go. I think it might have been a glitch, but now we are down to 8. And at this point I would also urge you to kind of go in and choose what kind of colors you want to use. I think we're gonna go with like a blue color scheme, and I think that kind of has a nice little pop to it. So not too vibrant, but it still pops. So this is where I urge you to definitely go into some toolkit items. If you want to, I'm gonna try and make a collection of toolkit items that you guys can use as well. Link will be in the description. A collection of those, so you guys can get the collection of toolkit items that I'm using for this video and everything like that. So typically not a lot of coasters do, but some coasters do start right off with the lift hill. We are going to do a turn out of the station first, and I urge you to try not to keep too much on a 90-degree angle or anything like that. Try to go a little bit diagonal, use some diagonals. So we're going to start off with 90 degrees here. Maybe go off right here. I'm actually going to place, and I'm going to delete one, undo angle snap. That way it keeps that 90-degree angle. And then I'm going to go and lower this just a tiny bit. We're just going to maybe no more than 2 degrees or so. And then that way you're kind of going downwards, and that way we don't need to put any like drive tires or anything like that. That's why you also want to raise yourself off the ground a little bit. Now, I don't want to do another 90-degree turn. We're going to angle it a little bit, closer to 45 or so, and then we're going to shorten this piece up until it kind of gets a nice rounded piece here. So we're going to do that, and then I'm going to do a straight section that will level us back out to 0. That would be like a smaller piece. And then we want to kind of do our little pre-lift section. So this will be kind of a little bit, not like a super long section or anything. We're going to go ahead and put drive tires here just so it has that kind of look. And then we're going to get into our lift hill. Now, on the lift hill, this is going to be, I want it to be kind of like a newer gen B&M invert. So we're going to be closer to the 45-degree range on the lift hill. I don't want to go completely 45, so I'm going to place a piece, delete it. I do that all the time. That way, if I want to go off, I can actually still keep that 45-degree angle. We're going to go a little bit closer to 40, I think. 40, 42. I wish there was an official way to, you know, figure out what that is. So then we're going to go up here. I'm going to expand my pieces just a little bit. So it's a pretty steep lift hill. This will get us to around the 150, 160 range. And then this next piece, when we will go ahead and angle snap it, go down to 0. And I'm going to shrink this piece up a little bit. And that'll put us at 168. Now, you have different options here when it comes to your coaster drop here. You can do a little pre-drop like some of the old gen, or kind of older generation B&M inverts, or we can do kind of like a regular drop. Now, I like to get my lift hill over the after the 0% a little bit here, so kind of like this or so. So my lift hill doesn't actually end until about right here. So we can do that. Now we have a couple options here. We can do a drop turn, which is what you're mostly going to see on like B&M inverts, kind of like a nice steep drop turn that kind of goes around like this. Or we can do other things. Now, there are different things you can do when it comes to your drops, or like when it comes to smoothing and everything like that. So I'm going to kind of show you that. I'm not going to go through this entire layout. I'm just going to show you kind of what my process is. Now, a lot of people like to have the mods to where you can do 1 meter. If you don't have any mods, you'll be at 4 meter right here. A lot of people like to do the 4 meter, 1 meter method. You don't have to do that, guys. You can do something different that is going to be almost pretty much just as effective, and that's use as long as you want. I like to do kind of like this, maybe around like this, and then you can change later on. Like, we're gonna start off, I think, going a little bit steeper, and I always urge you to kind of keep your angle snapping off so you can kind of really get an idea of what it is, like just what looks the smoothest here. So we're gonna start off here, and then also, before you get too far into it, go to your utility settings, and you'll find like the banking offset. Now, there's this thing called heart lining and a lot of coasters that you're going to want to implement. If you put it all the way up to 7, you can see that it's kind of going to rotate around like this. So if you have it at 0, it doesn't rotate at all. It just stays put. But if you have this up, it's going to rotate like around kind of like a circle, almost as a heart line. So that's basically what that is. For my method of building coasters, I'm always going to set this to 7, all the way up as high as you can, 7 feet. So what we're going to do first, before we get into our bank turn, we're going to go ahead and rotate this with the banking offset. And it's going to look very funky at first, but after we smooth it out, it will be just fine. We're going to go, and you always want to overbank it because the smoothing will get rid of your banking. We're going to go to about 65 degrees. For this particular drop. And then we're about right here, and we're gonna start, let's go about, maybe do about 15 degrees, and we're just gonna keep a hold of that. And then about when we get midway or so, we might bend that a little more actually. So instead of 15, let's push it up to 30. Push up to 30, and I'm going to make these pieces just a little bit longer. Like that. And then when we get to about here, we're going to want to start leveling it out. So this one will go to 40. And then just kind of eyeball it till you get close to the ground. Go about 5 more. And then we'll go to about maybe 30 there. And maybe we can start going down to 20. And then probably want to get to 0 now. So now we're at our bottom of the hill. And you can shape this how you want. I did make this a little steeper than what you would probably see on a lot of B&Ms, but that's okay. So after we place that one, I'm going to level ourselves out here. So we're going to go down to 0, put this down to 0, and that will get our hill. I'm actually going to go ahead and start raising it up just a little bit, but not too much. You want to keep this a nice, since this will be our top speed of the ride, you want to make sure it's kind of more gradual. Going in, you have a bigger thing, because when it comes to forces, now like I said, this isn't going to look smooth at first, so you can see we're right here, but remember, once we go back to smooth it, that's when it's going to change. So you can literally make whatever you want at this point. You can kind of, if you want to go for higher ratings, make sure that you're maintaining your speed pretty well, so you're not having any points where your cars are going to be very slow. So make sure you stay lower than your last element, a pretty substantial amount. When it comes to elements, you are more than welcome. I encourage you to use some of the prefabricated ones sometimes. If you feel confident enough to do your own custom stuff, you can. But if you're not confident in like making your own vertical loop, you can put in your own vertical loop. I wouldn't do it from here, so if you were to do a vertical loop from here, make sure you're at 0 first. For sure. So like here, if you're going into a vertical loop, I wouldn't go up first, which I don't think we're going to do a vertical loop first, but like if we did a vertical loop, I'd do that first, and then I'd put in the vertical loop like this. And then you can adjust the height. I would put it somewhere around here. You can see we're at 168 there. You want to have a decent amount of speed if you're going to put it in here. So vertical loops, I urge you to use the in-game pieces. They're just fine as long as you can make the transition smooth. So but anyways, after this, we're going to go in and I'm just going to do a little bit of a time-lapse session here so you guys can kind of see my process a little bit quicker. As long as you're familiar with how this works, you should be able to follow this or kind of view what I do here. So let's get into the time-lapse. Okay, so basically I'm going to talk a little bit over this time-lapse to kind of explain everything that is going on. So when we get to certain parts of time lapses and stuff, you guys kind of have an idea of what is going on. So basically, we're going to start things off with a 0G roll, and again, you kind of just shape it up the way you want to, and again, just have some inspiration when you're trying to figure out what elements you want to do, and just keep going, you know, and use whatever size pieces you want. You know, you can shorten them and everything. It's pretty straightforward, so I don't feel like I need to explain it too much on how to shape up your pieces and stuff. You know, you can shape them up the way you want to, and it's really up to you. And I think the smoothing section, the part that just needs to be explained the most. So just make sure that you have your banking offset up all the way. It's going to look very janky at the start, but that's okay. That's not a huge deal. The only other thing I would say towards the end of your layout, make sure you create your brake run before you finish everything. So create your brake run, and then if you're going from a turn into the brake run, do the turn and the brake run first. So you'll see here that I'm doing my turn first right here, and actually then auto-completing. That way you still have your heart lining going into the brake run, because if you just auto-complete it to the brake run, it's going to remove your heart lining. So just make sure you have that. This is the section where I actually forgot to unmute myself. I was muted the whole time because I knew I was going to have a time lapse. So basically, I'm going to just talk over this whole section for now. So after this, you want to make sure that for smoothing so after you complete your layout, you're going to do all your smoothing next. You can do 3 to 4 pieces, so select 3 to 4 sections a track. I typically go with around 3 if I'm using longer pieces. If you're using longer pieces, I say 3. If you're doing shorter pieces, maybe do 4. But if you have long pieces, kind of like what I did kind of more longer pieces here. I'm going to do 3. And if you don't have the mod, you just click smooth and move it forward. So basically, you're just going to click smooth once, and then you're going to move it forward like that and continue all the way through the layout. But if you have the mod, you can just click smooth forward and smooth backwards. If you have the smoothing mod, it just speeds things up. But if you don't, you're going to have to move it manually. So just kind of time lapse through that. And you really only need to go about 2 times. You can go through 3 times maybe. And I just say go in, do a POV, see if it's smooth enough for you. If you think it needs to be smoothed out a little bit more, go through a 3rd time. And that's what we did here, is just we're just going in and making sure that everything's smooth. This is after we did everything here. Speed it up to the top, of course, so we can kind of get a feel for the layout. You want to make sure your layout is completely the way you want it before you start to do any sort of custom supports and everything, because if you do your custom supports beforehand, you're not going to be too happy. You know, if you do them beforehand and you have to make changes, it can be a little bit messy, and it's a lot easier just to make sure that you have everything you want where you want it before you get to that point. Otherwise, it can cause some issues, because obviously you could create custom supports, and then if you end up changing a section of track, you're going to have to adjust the supports as well. So just go through, make sure your track is the way you want it. I think the only thing I had here is just maybe a couple sections that I felt like I could smooth out a little bit more, and I didn't even feel like I had to do a full go back a 3rd time, but typically you only have to do the smooth technique 2 to 3 times. And I put this whole layout together probably within about 20 minutes overall. So you can create layouts and everything fairly quickly if you put your mind to it. So just keep that in mind. And I love that's my smoothing method that I have always used. If you've seen some of my previous videos, you know that I have that smoothing method where you basically just smooth 3 pieces at a time with banking offset all the way up. And that's basically the best way if you want to create quick layouts, but also very smooth at the same time. Now, the only other things I would probably change here is basically the dive loop kind of has a weird looking shape to it, so we did go back in there and change that at some point. And then we're also going to do a block section and run 2 trains to see how well it runs with 2 trains. For the 2 train operation, I can have up to 3 trains, but we're only going to do 2 trains for this one. You also kind of want to maybe test out your dispatch intervals, because your next train will dispatch after the other train clears the next block section, which does kind of suck sometimes because that's not very realistic all the time. But the good thing is there is a dispatch interval setting you can change inside Planet Coaster, which allows you to create a dispatch interval between dispatches. That way the next train won't dispatch for a certain amount of seconds. We'll get into that later, because basically I tested it out first to see if the other train would stop at the top of the lift. That's basically what you want to avoid, is your train stopping at the very top of the lift before you're ready for it to. So that's one thing you want to make sure of before when you're getting into your dispatch interval times and stuff, and then you just try out different times. And at this point I knew it was going to stop at the top of the lift at least for a few seconds before it clears the block section. And if you have a mid-course brake run, it might not actually make too much a difference. So mid-course brake runs are very nice to have if you do, and then it also allows you to have more trains as well. So as you can see there. But if you go down to the settings here, you can actually see we can set a dispatch interval, and I went ahead and went with 60 seconds for this particular one. So we're going to do 60 seconds and then test it and see if it actually waits long enough. So you can see after it clears the lift hill, the other train's not going to move right away because we have that dispatch interval set, and that way it has to wait 60 seconds before it can dispatch again. So you can see that it's going to go through a decent amount of the layout before that second train actually dispatches. So make sure you're good on your block zones and all of that, so you are better prepared for all that stuff. So So we're gonna let this roll out and make sure, because you can see it's dispatching now right as it gets to the end of this final, or last few turns going into the brake run. And that is pretty good, and I was pretty satisfied with that dispatch interval, so we're gonna leave it there and move on to make sure. So now that our dispatch interval is good, we can run 2 trains in a more realistic kind of way. So I'm checking out on that. And then you also want to check a lot of your test settings to make sure that you don't have like too high G-forces and everything like that. That's something else that we can look at here in a moment. You can see our ratings here. There's a lot of different settings you can change. You can change your friction multiplier and lift hill speeds to kind of maybe help boost your excitement ratings as well. So that's another way you can boost those ratings. But you can also look at your live data and your test results as your trains go through with these heat maps. If you go over to heat maps, you can actually see based off of what it is. So you can do like excitement, you can do fear, nausea, and all that different stuff, and all your different G-forces. So you can actually kind of take a look at like your different G-forces as well. If you want to lower your fear or higher your fear, make your fear a little bit higher, different stuff like that, you can use these heat maps to look where all the hot spots are and maybe where you can adjust some of your layout a little bit. Again, you want to make sure you do all of this again before we get into all of the custom supporting as well, because you want to make sure that your layout is the way you want it to be 100% before you go further into everything else. So I ended up being pretty happy with this. There's a few G-forces that were a little high. I'd say as long as you're not going into the 5 Gs, you're pretty good. If you're staying at around the 4 G range for on most of the stats, which we were within under 5 Gs on everything, so I decided to keep it the way it was, and I thought that was pretty good. You can see some of those turns probably could have been a little wider to help with those G-forces, but I did want it to be a little bit of a forceful ride in some spots, so you can keep we're gonna keep it the way it is for right now, and I'm pretty confident with that. With all our turns and everything. And then there was a final turn over here at the end, right before the brake run, that I wanted to adjust. I can't remember if I adjusted it here soon or if I adjusted the dive loop first. I think I did the dive loop first. Yeah, we're going to adjust the dive loop shaping a little bit. So as you can see here, we're going to go in here and we're going to actually go and select the parts of the dive loop that I want to raise up a little bit. I first tried doing the smooth tool just to see if it would raise it up, and that's exactly what it did. So the smooth tool actually, I just kind of spammed the smooth tool a little bit, and it actually went through and shaped it up the way I wanted it to. You can use that smooth tool quite a bit sometimes in some of those situations, or you can use some of the arrows to kind of guide your track in a way that you need to, and then just kind of smooth it out a little bit sometimes. So I went ahead and went through the drop one more time with smoothing because I felt like it was just slightly a little jittery on the drop, so I decided to go through that one more time with a smooth tool. And then we did kind of like our final test here for this to make sure that everything I want is the way that I want it to be for the ride. So always make sure that you're testing it out and making sure that your POV is where you want it to be. And again, always do front bumper view. It's going to be the smoothest when you do your POVs and stuff. You want to make sure you're on front bumper view for all of your coasters and stuff when you're trying to record POVs or any sort of stuff like that. You want to make sure you're in that beautiful front POV, front bumper view. So going through the layout, I was mostly looking at the drop, and then of course the dive loop. It turned out pretty good. It actually made it a little bit smoother, actually, getting that shaping a little bit more correct. You can see it's not perfect by any means, but no coaster really is perfect when it comes to smoothing. Like, B&Ms are pretty glass smooth, but even if there's just a tiny bit of a few spots that are not they're not bad. Like, I would consider this to be perfectly smooth, glass smooth, you know, just fine. And I would compare it to like 1 meter, 4 meter method. I think it's almost just as good, if not better sometimes. So you don't need to do 1 meter, 4 meter to do that. So just keep that in mind. You don't have to. You just don't have to. But you can see that there's all our statistics for this ride. It's 67 miles an hour, so very similar speed to like Banshee. I think Banshee is right at 67 or 68 miles an hour. And again, I kind of used some elements that was inspired by Banshee and everything like that. Those are inspiration coaster for this, even though we're doing different colors and of course different that. And of course it's a completely different layout. It's not as long. I did a kind of a short layout, so it's kind of like a mini, I kind of made it like a mini Banshee, and you can see I rearranged some of the elements a little bit too, to cater to what we wanted to do here. So, but I think it turned out pretty good overall, and that is basically the layout complete. And once you're pretty much satisfied with that layout, you can start on your custom supports. I think we actually do go to this bank right here. I did notice it right there, I think, where I'm like, that is banked a little bit too much than where I wanted it to be. So also keep in mind that the dispatch interval sometimes doesn't always work until you open the ride. So sometimes when just testing it, it is a little bit buggy and glitchy where it doesn't always work to your favor. So I'm almost to the point actually where I realized that I don't have my audio turned on, and I actually realized that I was muted the whole time. So that's why I did this voiceover. So sorry for the little weird audio transition here, but we'll get to past me realizing that my audio was muted. But all right, here we go. So at this point, guys, I would say we should go in and find some reference photos for supporting on some of these elements. So I'm going to look for supports that have a drop turn like this. So I would probably look up Banshee, same with the 0G roll and dive loops, and just kind of go from there. So that's what we're going to do for that. So before we get into that, I do think this is a little bit too banked on this final turn. So I think we are going to go and maybe just bend it a little bit. And don't be scared to do some of this stuff, because you can always undo it. If that makes sense, so. Always undo. Undo is your friend. Alright. I think that's good. And that was just a little bit too far banked for me. Alright. So I'll be back and just kind of follow the time lapse, and you know, like I'm gonna try and make it not too fast, but to a point where you can still kind of see what you're doing, if that makes sense. So if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to ask it. It's pretty straightforward though on how to custom supports B&Ms. That's why I urge you to kind of start with B&Ms, because a good thing to do is once you get a couple of supports made, you can really just kind of copy and paste them to other sections and just adjust the heights and where they connect. So let's go ahead and get into that real quick. Alright, so you can see here that we have done a lift hill support. I always would say always start at the top. That way you have the tallest support ever, or the tallest support total. Again, I modeled this one off of Banshee, so if you're going off of a different one, you might model it off of a different one. So if you're not doing an invert similar to Banshee, I definitely would look at those supports because they have changed over the years. So if you're modeling it off of something a little bit different, I would definitely look at a little bit else. Also make sure they're part of the same scenery group and all that fun stuff. So always go from the top and then work your way down. So now that I've created this one, I can actually use it as kind of like a base for the rest of my lift hill. So like I can reuse this. Again, B&M supports are very minimal. There's not as many. So like there's probably only going to be a few supports here. So I'll probably do another one about right here, and then we'll kind of go from there. So Alright, and that's kind of like the beginning there. Love the support structure. I'm going to go toolkit items. Here's another one I like to do. Is use this staircase. I'm going to make it blue. And do a little staircase that leads from here. So maintenance has access. We'll have access to get from up here. That looks pretty good. Now it is a little bit short from where we need it, but either leave it and put a bottom on there, or we can just do that. Sometimes that works pretty good too. Alright, so if we click on here, we can see if our excitement rating's gone up. Not yet. Or track scenery rating's still very low, but it will go up after we do a lot more. And basically, we're just going to keep doing this with our supports until we have a result that we're happy with. So I'm just going to keep looking at my references. Okay, so go into our next one. We'll go in here and take a look at what our support structure kind of looks like. Alright, so we're to the time lapse where we're going to be time-lapsing this entire section where I do all the rest of these custom supports, and mostly because I don't think we have to go real-time for all of these supports, because basically all you really need to do is get your references, get your photos of what you're basing your ride off of, and really just kind of go based off that. If you do that, it's actually very, very easy to do custom supporting, especially for BNMs at least. Because all you got to do is look at the different types of support structures that they're using and just kind of recreate them with your beams, your flanges, and your connectors. So I am using a thememaker's toolkit custom support kit that I have. Again, I'll link those if you guys want to use that. You can also use the in-game ones if you want to, but I think these ones just have the perfect thickness when it comes to like B&Ms. So So you'll notice that this is going to be a long, tedious process. Yes, it is, and that's probably what kept you from doing custom supports for so long. However, you're gonna be dedicating maybe an hour or two of doing this. So the best way to do it, just kick on some music and get some vibes going. That's the easiest way to get through this tedious process. But I also want to let you know that after you get the first few supports done, all it really is a matter of copying and pasting and just kind of adjusting heights and angles of some of your stuff that when it comes to your support structures. So you can see that on the 0G roll right there, that I actually just had to angle one of my things a little bit, or one of my beams a little bit, because it was in contact of the track underneath. So you might have to do a few things like that overall, but just copy and paste most of these things after you get a few of your basic support structures up. You can really just copy and paste it. You don't have to go from scratch on each and every one. Just copy and paste your main structures, and you could even keep a set off to the side if you want to. Just create your basic structures, keep them off to the side, and go from there, honestly. Like, you don't have to do all of it at once. Just copy and paste and just kind of adjust from there. And there's a few times where I found myself cheating a little bit. When I should have been using like a different piece, I would just like angle it instead. When it comes to like some of the connectors and stuff. And I also recommend doing your footers also as you go along. Otherwise, you're gonna have to go back and do all the footers individually, and that one's a little bit non-fun. So I definitely recommend that you do those as you go. So every time you place or copy your custom support in, just make sure you adjust your footers as well, and then delete the excess. If you're like making a copying and pasting a longer piece and shrinking it down, just make sure you delete all the excess beams that you're not using that are underground. That way it doesn't hurt your performance as much, and you have less pieces that you're using. You want to make sure you're using the least amount of pieces as possible for each one. So you don't want to have any unnecessary extra beams. You don't have to, but I recommend you do that especially if your PC can't handle all of that. So, but yeah, just go through, copy paste, and just kick on some music, and you're going to be here for about an hour or two. I think this took me a little over an hour of work when I did all these custom supports, and I got through it okay. I have really bad patience issues myself, so just keep that in mind that it is a tedious process, but the results at the end are so worth it because it looks so much better and more realistic overall. So keep that in mind, and you're going to be just okay. So now that we're getting to the vertical loop, I did have to kind of go from scratch a little bit on some of these because, when you get to some of those elements that just use very much different and unique structures, sometimes you do have to go from scratch for some of those, vertical loop obviously is one of those, but it's for the most part, B&M loops aren't too hard to custom support. I just kind of went off of Banshee's loop, and it has kind of like this interesting one at the bottom that connects both sides, which is what I just built there. And then I just kind of built a little bit in between. Sometimes I like to do the main, work on the main elements with the custom supports, and then just do the turns and stuff in between afterwards and just kind of fill it in. Sometimes I'll do that just because those filler elements or those filler turns and stuff are very quick and easy to do, and I kind of want to get the more complex and crappy ones out of the way first, so that way I can kind of complete it. I feel like it speeds things up, but it probably doesn't, honestly. But yeah, so just go through, make sure you get all of your support structures, and once you're done, you can feel relieved because you just went through the most tedious part. And I think creating the tracks is one of the more fun parts, and then when you get to custom supporting, it's not that fun, but they're very important visually to make your track just look a lot better and just more realistic overall. So that's about it for our custom supports. So we're almost pretty much done. And look at this. we might actually have just enough clearance to do this without interfering with this. We'll have to wait and see. Let's go in here. I'm gonna go find this piece, which is the suspended coaster. I like to use this piece for my transfer tracks quite often, because they work pretty well. And then you can build a transfer building there. All right. So that is our coaster. It's looking pretty fine. There's always a lot more we could do with it, of course. Let's go ahead and see the track results after this. After you get like a lot of scenery and foliage inside there, you know, it will kind of change. It does say our track scenery is still very low, which is kind of interesting. Honestly, but after you get like a lot of foliage and a lot more scenery, that will change over time. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If it did, be sure to leave a like, be sure to share, be able to comment, whatever. If you have any concerns, of course, be sure to comment and everything like that. And let me know if you want to see more tutorial videos like this later in the future. So thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you have a great day and an even cooler tomorrow, and I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks and goodbye.